What would you do if you saw hundreds of people, one after another, suddenly start dancing uncontrollably, unable to stop, no matter how hard they tried? Sounds like a bizarre scene from a horror movie, doesn't it? But this wasn't fiction. In 1518, in the heart of Europe, a strange and terrifying phenomenon swept through the streets, claiming the lives of dozens and leaving the rest in a state of utter madness. Stay with me, because what follows is a tale that will challenge everything you know about the human mind. In the summer of 1518, the small city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the epicenter of one of the most bizarre and terrifying events in recorded history. It all began on a hot July day when a woman named Frau Trafia, without warning or apparent reason, began to dance wildly in the streets, her body twisted and jerked uncontrollably, her movements erratic as if some unseen force had taken hold of her. At first, people simply watched in confusion, unsure of what to make of this strange spectacle. But then, something extraordinary happened. Within days, more and more people began to join her. It wasn't just one or two individuals, it was dozens. The contagion spread like wildfire, and what started as a strange and isolated occurrence quickly turned into an epidemic. Soon there were hundreds of people dancing, their bodies moving frantically, unable to stop, their faces etched with pain and confusion. The music that played in their minds, if they could even hear it, was not one of celebration, but of torment. Some danced for hours, others for days, and some even continued without ceasing for weeks. Exhausted, drenched in sweat, and utterly bewildered, these people seemed to be trapped in a nightmarish cycle. Those who tried to stop were met with violent resistance from their own bodies, as if their limbs had a will of their own. As the days passed, the situation grew more dire. The dancers began to collapse, their bodies succumbing to exhaustion, strokes, and heart attacks brought on by the extreme strain of the constant movement. It wasn't long before local authorities began to take notice of the growing madness. At first, they tried to downplay the event. They assumed it was nothing more than an isolated case of insanity, perhaps triggered by some local superstition or religious fervor. But then the numbers grew. What was initially a handful of affected individuals became a full-fledged crisis. The dance, once thought to be an oddity, was now a pandemic. In their desperation, the authorities turned to religious explanations. It was 1518, a time when the power of the church loomed large over every aspect of life. The people of Strasbourg, worn down by years of famine, disease, and unrest, were desperate for answers. The church, ever present in moments of crisis, was called upon to provide an explanation. What could be causing this strange phenomenon? Could it be some form of divine punishment? Or was it the work of demons? The theories about the cause of the dancing plague began to multiply, each more bizarre than the last. Some said the dancers were possessed by evil spirits, cursed by God for their sins. Others believed that it was a form of mass hysteria, a psychological epidemic that spread through the town like wildfire. But none of these explanations were enough to stop the dance. In an effort to control the situation, the local authorities took a drastic step. They decided that the only way to stop the plague was to let it run its course. They allowed the dancing to continue, hoping that eventually the affected individuals would wear themselves out and collapse from exhaustion. But instead of subsiding, the epidemic grew worse. The more people danced, the more others joined in, until it was clear that this wasn't just a physical ailment, it was a psychological one. In a desperate move, the city's leaders even hired musicians to play for the dancers. They believed that by providing a steady rhythm, they could encourage the afflicted individuals to dance in a more controlled manner. But this decision only worsened the situation. The music became a hypnotic force, driving the dancers to move even more frantically. Some danced for days on end, unable to stop, their bodies trembling from exhaustion, their faces pale from lack of sleep. It was a scene of utter madness, one that no one, neither the dancers nor the onlookers, could comprehend. As the weeks passed, the town of Strasbourg descended into chaos. The number of dancers continued to grow, and the death toll climbed. It is estimated that as many as 400 people may have been affected by the dancing plague, though the exact number remains unknown. Some historians believe that as many as 40 people died from exhaustion or heart failure, their bodies collapsing after days of non-stop movement. Others speculate that the toll may have been even higher, but due to the chaotic nature of the event, accurate records were never kept. The local community, once proud of its strong ties to the church, found itself torn apart by fear and confusion. The traditional explanations, possession, punishment, or divine will no longer seem to make sense. What could possibly explain such a bizarre and destructive phenomenon? How could so many people from all walks of life suddenly begin to dance uncontrollably? What force could drive them to such extremes? Despite the efforts of religious leaders, physicians, and other authorities, the plague of dancing seemed to have no end in sight. The people of Strasbourg were left to wonder if there was any hope of stopping it. Could they find a cure for this mysterious madness? Or would they be doomed to live in fear of whatever strange force had taken hold of their city? As the summer wore on, the dancing plague began to fade as suddenly as it had appeared. The number of affected dancers gradually decreased, and those who had survived the ordeal were left with physical and emotional scars. The city, forever marked by this inexplicable event, tried to move on, but the memory of the madness lingered. Theories emerged. So what caused the dancing plague of 1518? Was it a form of mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon that spread through the population like wildfire? Or was it something far more sinister, an outbreak of ergot poisoning caused by the consumption of rye contaminated with a hallucinogenic fungus? Was it a supernatural curse, a form of divine retribution, or simply an incredibly rare and mysterious occurrence? While historians and scientists continue to debate the true cause of the dancing plague, one thing remains clear. The event was a reminder of the power of the human mind, the ways in which fear and stress can push people to the brink of madness. What began as a single, uncontrollable dancer spiraled into a crisis of unimaginable proportions, an event that continues to mystify and haunt us to this day. The dancing plague of 1518 slowly came to an end as mysteriously as it began, leaving the survivors, the people of Strasbourg, and even the wider world grappling with the haunting question: what exactly happened? In the weeks following the event, the town was left in a state of shock, trying to understand the trauma it had endured, what had caused such madness, and why. How did an entire town succumb to a force so strange, so uncontrollable? The survivors were physically exhausted, mentally broken, and haunted by the memory of what they had experienced. The event, though seemingly over, left a scar on the city's collective psyche. But while the plague of dancing had subsided, the mystery was far from solved. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the dancing plague was a form of mass hysteria. Mass hysteria, or collective obsessional behavior, occurs when a group of people experiences the same symptoms or behavior due to psychological factors, such as stress or fear. At the time, Strasbourg and much of Europe were enduring extreme hardship. There had been years of famine, economic instability, and the aftermath of the Black Death. People were living in a state of constant fear and anxiety. It's possible that under these extreme pressures, a psychological trigger, perhaps an event, a rumor, or even the sight of the first dancer set off a chain reaction. In mass hysteria, individuals, especially when they are under high emotional stress, can be influenced by the behavior of others. As more people saw others dancing uncontrollably, they may have felt compelled to join in, not necessarily by choice, but by a psychological pressure. The group dynamic could have played a major role in escalating the event, with the dancers feeding off each other's panic and fear, thus perpetuating the madness. However, while mass hysteria can explain how the event spread among a group, it does not entirely account for the violent physical reactions and the high death toll caused by exhaustion. That's where other theories come in. Ergot poisoning, another popular theory, one that has gained considerable traction among historians and scientists, is that the dancing plague was caused by ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other cereals, especially in damp conditions. It contains chemicals similar to LSD and can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and muscle spasms. In the 16th century, rye was a staple food in Europe, and the contaminated grain could have easily been consumed by large portions of the population. Ergot poisoning, also known as street Anthony's fire, could explain many of the symptoms witnessed during the dancing plague, including the uncontrollable movements and the physical collapse of the dancers. Some modern researchers have even pointed out that the outbreak occurred during a particularly wet season, which would have created ideal conditions for the fungus to flourish on crops. Additionally, rye bread, which was commonly eaten at the time, could have been contaminated with ergot. Those who ate the tainted bread would have ingested the hallucinogenic toxins, potentially leading to the erratic behavior witnessed in the streets of Strasbourg. However, the ergot theory has its limitations. While it could explain the hallucinations and physical convulsions, it doesn't fully account for the social and psychological aspects of the event. Why did the madness spread so quickly and among such a large number of people? And why did the dancing plague only occur in specific places like Strasbourg? Ergot poisoning alone cannot explain this widespread phenomenon. Divine punishment or supernatural causes. In the 16th century, people were heavily influenced by religious and supernatural beliefs. Many at the time believed that the plague was a form of divine punishment sent by God to punish the people for their sins. This idea was further fueled by the religious fervor that permeated the period. Some believed that the dancers were possessed by evil spirits or were victims of a curse. The church at the time struggled to explain the phenomenon, as it went against the conventional understanding of illness and punishment. But supernatural explanations were not uncommon in an era when disease and disaster were often attributed to divine wrath. The people of Strasbourg may have seen the dancing as a divine test or punishment for some hidden sin within the community, the social and psychological pressure of the time. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city beset by stress, fear, and deprivation. The people had endured years of suffering. Famine, plague, and social unrest had created an atmosphere of collective anxiety. During times of extreme stress, social phenomena like mass hysteria can take hold. In fact, it is known that in some instances, entire communities have experienced similar outbreaks of strange behavior during times of collective trauma. It's possible that the dancers, particularly those who joined in after Frau Raffia's initial outburst, were not just physically affected, but were also influenced by the deep psychological strain they had been under. This could explain why the epidemic was not restricted to the sick or mentally unstable, but affected people from all walks of life. Modern interpretations and legacy in modern times. The dancing plague of 1518 has become a subject of intrigue, not just for historians, but for psychologists and neuroscientists who have tried to understand how such a phenomenon could occur. Today, we understand that human behavior is not solely influenced by biology. It's also shaped by psychology, social dynamics, and culture. One modern interpretation that has emerged is the concept of mass psychogenic illness, where a group of people experiences symptoms without a clear medical cause. In the case of the dancing plague, it's possible that a combination of physical, psychological, and social factors triggered a collective mental breakdown, whether caused by ergot poisoning, mass hysteria, or a combination of both. The event highlights the delicate balance between the body, the mind, and the environment. The legacy of the dancing plague remains powerful. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of the human mind under extreme stress, and how social pressures can amplify bizarre behavior. It also speaks to the power of collective fear, superstition, and the influence of cultural and social forces on individual behavior. Though the event itself was brief, the impact it had on Strasbourg and the world continues to fascinate and puzzle those who study the bizarre, the unexplained, and the complex relationship between the mind and body. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most perplexing and tragic events. While the precise cause may never be fully understood, the theories, ranging from ergot poisoning to mass hysteria, offer valuable insights into the complexities of human behavior and psychology. The event has lived on as a symbol of the fine line between sanity and madness, and as a reminder of how easily fear, stress, and superstition can drive a society into chaos.